Why does a human being choose pain over happiness? The question is not why we suffer, because suffering is woven into the fabric of existence itself, but why we cling to it and why, when comfort finally appears, we feel suspicion instead of relief, why peace feels unsettling, why stability feels fragile, and why happiness often triggers doubt rather than gratitude. It is as if there is a quiet voice inside us whispering that happiness is not innocent, that calmness might be the beginning of losing something essential, something deeply human. Fyodor Dostoevsky never believed that human beings naturally seek comfort. He saw them as creatures willing to endure pain simply to prove that choice still belongs to them. Because freedom in its raw form is not comforting. It is heavy. It demands responsibility. When happiness is offered ready-made, safe, predictable, and carefully calculated, something inside us resists, not because we enjoy suffering, but because this kind of happiness demands nothing. No struggle, no risk, no true decision. It reduces life to a managed condition rather than a lived experience. And the human being cannot tolerate being fully managed, even when that management is benevolent. The moment the right to fail is removed, a part of humanity disappears with it. That is why people often sabotage peace just when it finally arrives, as if stability itself feels like a threat. Pain, unlike happiness, feels honest. Pain does not promise anything. It does not beautify reality or disguise its weight. It stands naked, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Perhaps that is why it feels strangely familiar. Pain forces you to confront yourself without masks, without performance, without excuses. It reminds you that you are still alive, still feeling, still capable of choosing, even if the choice leads toward destruction. Happiness may soothe you, but pain convinces you that you exist. Happiness also carries a hidden burden. Once you are happy, you are expected to protect it, maintain it, improve yourself, and remain grateful. You are required to justify your joy by becoming better, more stable, more functional. Pain, on the other hand, lowers expectations. Pain grants permission to pause, to collapse, to withdraw. It silences questions. It offers psychological shelter. That is why pain can feel easier to carry than happiness itself. At some point, a dangerous realization emerges. A person begins to see that part of their suffering is self-created. Not only society, not only circumstances, not only other people, but themselves. This realization is devastating because accepting it means accepting responsibility, and responsibility strips away excuses. Instead of facing this truth, many choose to sink deeper into pain because pain, once familiar, becomes a distorted form of safety. It hurts, but it makes sense. It has structure. It has a narrative. It explains life in a way that happiness never does. Dostoevsky understood that self-destruction is not always ignorance or weakness. Sometimes it is awareness pushed beyond comfort, awareness that sees the system clearly and refuses to play along. When a person destroys themselves, a twisted inner logic whispers that at least this is chosen. Even failure feels less humiliating when it is self-inflicted rather than imposed. But eventually, something more terrifying appears. Not pain, but the emptiness left behind when pain fades. When struggle quiets and chaos disappears, the individual stands alone without a story, without excuses, without an identity built on suffering. Many people construct their entire sense of self around pain. When healing threatens that pain, it feels like annihilation rather than relief. Healing does not merely remove suffering. It dismantles the identity formed around it. This is where freedom reveals its true weight. Freedom stops being a dream and becomes suffocating. Freedom means there is no one left to blame. Not the past, not society, not fate. Freedom means standing alone before your choices, your failures, and your emptiness. That is why so many return to pain as refuge. Pain offers explanation. Pain offers a role. Pain offers a life that can be endured without questions. With prolonged awareness comes a quieter, more dangerous suffering, existential exhaustion. Not despair, not breakdown, just fatigue. Fatigue from thinking, choosing, carrying yourself every day. This exhaustion pushes people towards certainty of any kind, even false certainty, an ideology, a rigid belief, an authority that decides for them, not because they are evil, but because they are tired. Here, evil takes its most subtle form. Not cruelty, not violence, but surrender. Surrendering responsibility in exchange for rest. Closing one's eyes to avoid the weight of awareness. This is not a dramatic collapse, but a silent agreement. A decision to stop choosing altogether. The human being does not fall because they chose wrong, but because they stopped choosing. Dostoevsky did not preach despair, but he rejected illusion. He understood that a human cannot survive indefinitely in emptiness. One must either create meaning, borrow it, or collapse. Yet he warned that borrowed meaning, when it erases individuality, becomes another prison disguised as salvation. Eventually, a quiet moment arrives. Nothing explodes. No revelation descends. Only the awareness that knowledge cannot be undone. Once you see yourself clearly, innocence never fully returns. Truth does not save you. It only frees you from lies. And freedom from lies is not comforting. It is demanding. At this stage, pain changes its meaning. It is no longer an identity, no longer a protest, no longer a refuge. It becomes part of reality. Something endured, not glorified, not weaponized, not used as justification. The person who reaches this point no longer says, "I am suffering," but "I am responsible." And few sentences carry more weight than that. Responsibility here does not mean control, success, or perfection. It means stopping the escape, living without hiding behind the past, behind others, or behind stories that justify fear. Living the day as it is, incomplete, heavy, uncertain, yet real. Dostoevsky does not promise happiness. What he hints at is something quieter and rarer, a fragile peace born from honesty rather than comfort, a state where you no longer need to argue with your reflection, where you are less divided against yourself, where life is not easier but truer. And in the end, he leaves you with a question that refuses to disappear. Now that you understand your pain, your fear of healing, the weight of freedom, and the exhaustion of awareness, how will you live? This question is not answered with words, but with the way you wake up tomorrow, and with the small choices you make when no one is watching. If this unsettled you, that's the point. If it challenged something inside you, don't ignore it. Subscribe for more ideas that don't comfort, but clarify.